Some journeys are planned. Others are destined. Her name is Alessandra, 32 years old, American, trained as an art historian, specializing in medieval architecture. She has a PhD she's never used professionally, a marriage that ended 8 months ago, and a suitcase full of clothes she packed without really seeing them. She arrived in Scotland because she had to go somewhere. Anywhere that wasn't the apartment in Boston she'd shared with David for 6 years. Anywhere that wasn't the city where every coffee shop held a memory, every street corner a ghost. The divorce was final in March. By April, she'd quit her adjunct teaching position. Too many sympathetic looks from colleagues who'd known them as a couple. By May, she'd sublet the apartment. By June, she was on a plane. She told her mother she was doing research, following up on her dissertation about sacred geometry in medieval Scottish architecture. It sounded legitimate, academic, like a woman with a plan. The truth was simpler and more pathetic. She was running away. She drove through Scotland's autumn landscape in a rented car, following roads that curved like questions without answers. The trees were turning, gold and amber and rust. The sky was that peculiar Scottish grey that isn't dreary so much as profound, as if the clouds are holding something back, deciding whether to share it. She'd planned to visit Edinburgh's major sites: the castle, the Royal Mile, St. Giles Cathedral, all the places her dissertation committee would find respectable. But then she saw a road sign, Rosslyn, 7 miles, and something in her chest, something that hadn't stirred in months, pulled. She took the turn without thinking about it, followed the winding road through increasingly rural landscape. Farms, stone walls, sheep dotting hillsides like punctuation marks in a sentence she was still learning to read. The village of Rosslyn appeared suddenly, a cluster of stone buildings that looked like they'd grown from the earth rather than been built upon it. She parked near a small hotel called the original Rosslyn Inn. Victorian-era building. Lace curtains in windows. A sign advertising home-cooked meals and ghost tours on request. She checked in. The proprietor was a woman in her 60s with steel-grey hair and kind eyes. Mrs. MacLeod, the guest register said. Just passing through, dear. Mrs. MacLeod asked as she handed over a heavy iron key. Research, Alessandra said. The lie came easily now. Medieval architecture. Ah. Mrs. MacLeod smiled. Then you'll be visiting the chapel. Tomorrow, probably. Good. Something flickered in Mrs. MacLeod's expression. Good. Visit during the day. It's better during the day. Alessandra laughed lightly. I'm not afraid of ghosts. Mrs. MacLeod didn't laugh back. She just looked at Alessandra with those kind, knowing eyes and said quietly, It's not ghosts you should worry about, dear. It's the things that aren't ghosts. The things that are still happening. Alessandra didn't know what that meant. Didn't ask. Just took her key and climbed the narrow stairs to a room that smelled like lavender and old wood. She unpacked her suitcase, hung 3 dresses she'd never wear, placed her laptop on a desk by the window, tried to feel like this meant something, like she was doing something purposeful. But all she felt was hollow, like a bell that had forgotten how to ring. The divorce hadn't been dramatic. No affairs, no fights, just a slow realization, over years, that they'd become strangers who shared an address. David wanted children. She couldn't, actually, biologically, a fact that had turned from a medical detail into a relationship-ending flaw once David decided he wanted to be a father. "I love you," he'd said on the day they signed the papers. "But I can't build a life on this." She'd nodded, signed, left, and hadn't cried until she was 3 blocks away, sitting in her car, gripping the steering wheel until her knuckles turned white. Now, 2 months later, sitting in a Scottish hotel room as evening fell, she still hadn't figured out how to feel about her own life. Was she grieving? Was she relieved? Was she angry? All of it. None of it. The emotions came and went like weather, refusing to settle into anything she could name and therefore handle. She looked out her window. The chapel was visible from here, a dark silhouette against the darkening sky. Trees surrounded it. Ancient trees, their branches bare against grey clouds. Beautiful. Lonely. Waiting. Alessandra made a decision without quite acknowledging she was making one. She put on her coat, her good walking boots, slipped her phone into her pocket, though there was no one she wanted to call, no one waiting to hear from her. She walked downstairs. Mrs. MacLeod was in the kitchen, but Alessandra slipped out the front door before the older woman could see her. It was 10:47 p.m. The village was quiet. A few windows glowed with warm light, but the streets were empty. This wasn't Edinburgh. People went to bed early here, woke with the dawn, lived in rhythm with seasons instead of schedules. Alessandra walked toward the chapel, not on the main road, but along a footpath she'd noticed earlier. Through trees, past the cemetery where local families had been burying their dead for centuries. The moon was full, or near enough. It turned the stone walls silver and made shadows sharp as knives. She reached the chapel grounds. There was a low wall, maybe 4 feet high. A sign, Rosslyn Chapel, open 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. Admission required. She looked at the gate. Locked, of course. She looked at the wall. Low enough. She climbed. It wasn't elegant. She scraped her knee, nearly lost her balance. But she got over, dropping into the chapel courtyard with a soft thud that seemed impossibly loud in the night quiet. She froze, waiting for lights to come on, for a security guard to shout, 4 alarms. Nothing. Just wind in the trees. Just her own heartbeat. Just moonlight on ancient stone. She walked toward the chapel entrance. Gothic arch, heavy wooden door. Locked, obviously. She put her hand on the wood. It was cold. Rough. 600 years of hands had touched this door. Kings. Monks. Murderers. Seekers. Now hers. And as if the chapel had been waiting for exactly this moment, exactly this woman, exactly this touch. The door moved. Not locked. Not latched. It swung inward with a creak that sounded like a word Alessandra couldn't quite hear. Welcome. Warning. Wait. She should leave. She knew that. This was trespassing. Possibly illegal. Definitely stupid. But she didn't leave. Because for the first time in 8 months, she felt something other than numbness. Curiosity. Wonder. Fear. Aliveness. She stepped inside, and Rosslyn Chapel received her into its darkness like a secret being kept. Chapter 2. First Contact. Moonlight makes truth-tellers of shadows. The darkness inside was absolute for 3 seconds. Then Alessandra's eyes adjusted, and the chapel revealed itself in gradations of grey and silver. Moonlight streamed through the high windows, those tall, Gothic windows that had witnessed so much history. The light fell in precise beams, illuminating sections of floor, pillars, carvings. Everything else remained in shadow. The air smelled like stone, like time, like candle wax from services held centuries ago, the scent molecules somehow still lingering, embedded in the porous sandstone. It smelled like memory. Alessandra stood just inside the door, not moving, barely breathing. She'd seen photos of this place. Read descriptions. Written 20 pages about its architectural significance in her dissertation. But being inside it, alone, at midnight, uninvited, was entirely different. The space felt occupied, not by people, by presence, as if the chapel were a living thing, aware of her intrusion, deciding whether to tolerate it. She took a step forward. Her footfall echoed, a small sound that became large, bouncing off vaulted ceilings, multiplying, returning to her ears like a question asking itself over and over. Why are you here? Why are you here? Why are you here? She didn't have an answer. Or maybe she had too many. Because David had stopped loving her. Because her body had betrayed her. Because she needed to prove she could still do something brave, even if that something was just climbing a wall and breaking into a church. She walked deeper into the nave, past the font, past carved figures of saints whose faces had worn smooth with age, past symbols she recognized from her studies, Celtic knots, green men, geometric patterns that represented the mathematical harmony of creation. And then she saw it. The reason people came to Rosslyn. The pillar. The apprentice pillar. Even in darkness, even with only moonlight touching its surface, it was breathtaking. The 8 dragons spiraled upward, their bodies intertwined in a double helix that scientists wouldn't discover in DNA for another 5 centuries after it was carved. The leaves at the crown seemed to move in the still air, a trick of shadow and light, but convincing enough to make Alessandra's breath catch. She walked toward it slowly, reverently. This pillar had been carved by a boy her age, younger, actually. A boy who dreamed of angels and paid for his gift with his life. She reached out, hesitated. Her fingertips hovered an inch from the stone. "Is it okay?" she whispered. To whom? She didn't know. The pillar. The boy. The chapel itself. No answer came, but no prohibition either. She touched the stone. It was warm. That was wrong. Stone shouldn't be warm at midnight in a Scottish September. It should be cold, should pull heat from her fingers, should feel like the dead thing it was. But it was warm, almost body temperature, like touching living skin. And then she saw him. Not clearly, not solidly, but there, in the corner of her vision, like a photograph overlaid on reality. A boy. 16, maybe 17. Dressed in rough wool and leather. Stone dust covering him like snow. He was carving. His hands moved with impossible speed and grace. The chisel sang against stone, a high, pure note that shouldn't exist but did. Alessandra yanked her hand back. The vision vanished. The singing stopped. She was alone in the chapel again, heart hammering, skin prickling with something between fear and wonder. "I'm hallucinating," she said aloud. Her voice echoed. Hallucinating, hallucinating, hallucinating. Low blood sugar. Jet lag. Stress. She was a scholar. A rationalist. She didn't believe in ghosts or visions or stones that held memory. But she believed what she'd seen, because it hadn't felt like imagination. It had felt like remembering, like the stone was showing her what it had witnessed, what it had absorbed, what it still carried. She sat down on the nearest pew. The wood creaked under her weight, a comforting, ordinary sound in this increasingly extraordinary night. She pulled out her phone. 11:23 p.m. No signal, of course. Stone walls 3 feet thick. She opened her notes app anyway. Started typing. Her historian's instinct. Document everything. In Rosslyn Chapel. Alone. Touched the apprentice pillar. Thought I saw. She stopped typing. Deleted it. What was she going to write? Saw a ghost. Had a vision. Her academic colleagues would think she'd had a breakdown. Maybe she was having a breakdown. She looked up at the ceiling. The famous ceiling. 213 carved stone cubes, each with a different geometric pattern. The cubes that supposedly encoded music, that supposedly held secrets, that supposedly... And then she heard it. Tap, 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 tap. A rhythm. Irregular but purposeful. Like someone working, carving, creating. It was coming from the direction of the apprentice pillar. Alessandra stood up slowly. Every rational part of her brain was screaming, "Leave. Now. This isn't safe. This isn't sane." But she didn't leave. She walked toward the sound. The chiseling got louder, more defined. She could hear the specific sound of metal on stone, could hear the small chunks of sandstone falling away, could hear breathing, rhythmic and focused. She reached the pillar. The sound was right there. Right there. So close she should be able to see who was making it. But there was no one. Just moonlight. Just shadow. Just the pillar itself, standing as it had stood for 500 years. And then, midnight. The chapel changed. Not visually. Not at first. But Alessandra felt it like a pressure drop before a storm, like the moment before an earthquake when animals start acting strange, when the air itself seems to hold its breath. The chiseling stopped, and something else began. The moonlight intensified, or seemed to. The shadows sharpened. And the chapel, which had felt occupied before, now felt crowded. With presences. With witnesses. With time itself, folding back on itself like origami, bringing past and present into the same space. Alessandra turned slowly, very slowly, scanning the chapel. And she saw them. Figures. Translucent. Layered over reality like double-exposed film. Not ghosts, they were too solid for that. Too present. More like echoes given form. Memories playing out in real time. The apprentice appeared first. The boy. He was working on the pillar, completely absorbed, unaware he was being watched. His face was peaceful. Intent. The face of someone doing exactly what they were born to do. Then another figure materialized. An older man. 50s, maybe. Well-dressed for a worker. This was the master. Alessandra knew it instantly. She could see the skill in his hands, the pride in his posture, and the poison in his eyes. He watched the apprentice work, watched the perfection emerging from stone. And his expression shifted from curiosity to appreciation to envy to something darker. Rage. Pure, undiluted rage born of inadequacy. Alessandra wanted to shout. To warn the boy. But her voice wouldn't work. And anyway, this had already happened. 500 years ago. She wasn't seeing the future. She was seeing the past, still playing out like a recording that had never stopped. The master picked up a hammer. Heavy. Meant for rough work, not delicate carving. The apprentice looked up, smiling. Innocent. Trusting. Master, you're back. Look, I finished. The hammer fell. Alessandra gasped. The sound broke whatever trance she'd been in. She stumbled backward, collided with a pew, nearly fell. When she looked again, the figures were gone. The chapel was empty. Silent. Just stone and moonlight and her own ragged breathing. She pressed her hands to her face. Her cheeks were wet. She was crying and hadn't realized it. "I'm sorry," she whispered. To the boy. To the chapel. To the universe that allowed such beauty to be destroyed by such ugliness. "I'm so sorry." And then, impossible, beautiful, terrifying. A voice behind her. Real. Solid. Undeniably present. They forgave each other, you know. Eventually. Alessandra spun around. A man stood in the aisle. Elderly. 70s, maybe. Wearing a thick wool robe over pajamas. Holding a flashlight pointed politely at the floor. He smiled. Gentle. Not surprised. Not angry. "You're not the first to climb that wall," he said quietly. "And you won't be the last. The chapel, it chooses who sees. And tonight, apparently, it chose you." "I'm Malcolm," he said. "The Guardian. And before you apologize for trespassing, don't. You're exactly where you're supposed to be." Chapter 3. The Procession of Shadows. At midnight, the living step aside, and the remembered remember themselves. Malcolm moved slowly, carefully, like someone who had learned patience from stones. He gestured to a pew. "Sit. Please. You look like you're about to faint." Alessandra Saturday. Not because she chose to, but because her legs suddenly refused to hold her weight. The adrenaline of the past few minutes was draining away, leaving her shaky and confused. "You saw the apprentice," Malcolm said. Not a question. A statement. Alessandra nodded. "And the master?" Another nod. "Did you see what happened after?" Malcolm asked gently. "After?" Alessandra's voice came out rough. "After the murder?" "Yes." She shook her head. The vision stopped. Or I couldn't watch anymore. Malcolm nodded as if this made perfect sense. He sat down in the pew in front of her, turned to face her. The flashlight he'd set on the floor cast strange shadows across his weathered face. The chapel shows people what they need to see, he said quietly. Not always what happened. Sometimes just the important parts. The parts that echo loudest. I don't understand, Alessandra said. I don't understand any of this. I'm a historian. I study architecture. I don't believe in, she gestured helplessly at the air around them, in this. Malcolm smiled. It was the kind smile of someone who'd had this conversation before. Many times. You don't have to believe, he said. The chapel doesn't require faith. It just is. Like gravity. Like time. You cannot believe in it all you want, but it keeps happening anyway. What is this? Alessandra asked. Are they ghosts? Are they? No, not ghosts. Malcolm shook his head. Ghosts implies something left behind. Remnants. Fragments. This is different. This is. He paused, searching for words. This is memory. Not human memory. Stone memory. He gestured around the chapel. These walls have witnessed 600 years of human emotion. Love, grief, devotion, murder, joy, despair. All of it, every intense moment, it leaves an impression. Like footprints in sand. Except sand erodes. Stone remembers. And on certain nights, Malcolm continued, when conditions are right, full moons, equinoxes, solstices, or sometimes just when someone with the right frequency is present, the memories replay. Not for everyone. Most people never see anything. But some. He looked at Alessandra directly. Some people are tuned to the right wavelength, and the chapel shows them. Why me? Alessandra whispered. Malcolm studied her for a long moment. Why do you think? Alessandra looked away. She didn't want to answer that. Didn't want to examine why a broken woman climbing walls at midnight might be exactly the kind of person a 600-year-old chapel would want to speak to. They're not finished, Malcolm said suddenly. What? The visions. They're not finished. The nights barely started. As if summoned by his words, the chapel shifted again. That same pressure change. That same sense of reality becoming porous, letting other times bleed through. Alessandra looked toward the apprentice pillar. The boy was there again, but this time his mother stood beside him. Not the stone carving. The real woman. Or the memory of her. She was younger than her famous sculpture. Maybe 40. Still beautiful despite the lines of hardship on her face. She reached out to touch her son's work, her expression a mixture of pride and fear. She knew, Malcolm whispered. She knew something bad was coming. Mothers always know. The mother turned, looked directly at Alessandra. And even though this was a memory, even though this woman had been dead for 5 centuries, Alessandra felt seen. The mother's lips moved. No sound came out, but Alessandra understood the words anyway. Love what you create. It will outlive you. Then more figures appeared. Not just 1 or 2, but dozens. A procession of shadows, layered across time, all occupying the same space but from different moments. There, a group of monks from the 15th century, singing vespers. Their voices created harmonies that Alessandra could almost hear, a polyphonic chant that touched her bones more than her ears. There, a nobleman, well-dressed, kneeling in prayer. William St. Clair himself, perhaps. His hands clasped so tightly his knuckles were white. What was he praying for? Forgiveness, guidance, the strength to complete his impossible dream. There, a woman in 16th century dress, her belly swollen with pregnancy. Mary, Queen of Scots. Alessandra's historian brain tried to catalogue details, the style of the dress, the cut of the sleeves, but her heart simply felt the woman's fear, her desperate hope for protection. There, soldiers from Cromwell's army, leading horses through the nave, laughing at jokes Alessandra couldn't hear, desecrating sacred space with their casual disregard. There, Victorian tourists, overdressed and uncomfortable, pointing at carvings, utterly unaware of the depth beneath what they were seeing. It's everyone, Alessandra whispered. Everyone who was ever here. Everyone who ever mattered. Not everyone, Malcolm corrected gently. Not the casual visitors. Not the ones who came and left unchanged. Only the ones who felt something. Who left pieces of themselves here. Who carved their emotions into the stones as surely as the apprentice carved his dragons. And then the knights appeared. 12 figures in white surcoats marked with red crosses. The Knights Templar. They rose from the floor. No, they walked through the floor, emerging from the crypts beneath like smoke taking shape. They moved in formation. Silent. Solemn. Their armor gleamed in moonlight that shouldn't touch metal that doesn't exist. They processed toward the altar. Each movement precise. Ritual. Sacred. Alessandra found herself standing without remembering the decision to stand. Malcolm stood too, out of respect or habit or some instinct older than either. The knights reached the altar, knelt in unison, and bowed their heads in prayer or meditation or remembrance. The leader, the one at the front, removed his helmet. But his face wasn't a face. It was light. Pure, gentle light. Not blinding. Comforting. Like the first dawn after a long night. He spoke. Or Alessandra heard words. Or she understood meaning without words. The distinction didn't seem to matter. We brought her here, the Beloved, the Magdalene, the Grail. Alessandra's throat tightened. In her academic work, she'd read the theories, the legends, the idea that Mary Magdalene wasn't a prostitute but a disciple, a teacher, possibly Jesus's wife, possibly the true heir to his mission, written out of history by men who couldn't stomach the idea of feminine divinity. Not in flesh, the voice continued, gentle as rain. In memory, in truth, in the knowledge that the sacred feminine is not separate from the sacred. That to love is to know God. That seeking is the finding. The light around the leaders had intensified, spread, filled the chapel like water filling a bowl. Alessandra felt it touch her, not on her skin, but deeper. In her chest, in the hollow place where her heart had been beating alone for so long. And then she understood. Not intellectually, viscerally. The chapel wasn't showing her history. It was showing her a mirror. The apprentice who created beauty despite knowing it would cost him everything. The mother who loved despite the certainty of loss. The master who destroyed what he couldn't possess. The knights who carried sacred truth across continents, across centuries, protecting mystery because mystery itself is holy. They were all parts of being human, creating, loving, envying, destroying, protecting, seeking. And she, Alessandra, 32, divorced, broken, climbing walls at midnight, she was all of them too. The light faded slowly. The knights stood, replaced their helmets, and walked back toward the floor. Through the floor. Into whatever realm they occupied when they weren't being remembered. One by one, the other visions faded too. The monks, the nobles, the soldiers, the tourists, Mary, William, the mother, until only the apprentice remained. He stood at his pillar, chisel in hand, stone dust in his hair like constellation dust. He looked at Alessandra across 500 years and smiled. Not a sad smile. Not a ghost smile. A smile of pure, uncomplicated joy. The smile of someone who knows that what they're creating will matter, will last, will speak to people they'll never meet, in languages that haven't been invented yet. He raised his chisel in a small salute. Creator to creator. Artist to artist. Broken soul to broken soul. Keep going, the gesture said. Whatever you're carving, in stone, in words, in the substance of your own life, keep going. It matters. You matter. And then he too faded. The chapel was empty again. Just Alessandra and Malcolm and moonlight and stone. Alessandra was crying. Properly crying now, not the stunned tears from before but deep, wrenching sobs that came from a place she'd been avoiding for months. Years, maybe. Malcolm didn't try to comfort her. Didn't offer platitudes. He just sat quietly, giving her space to fall apart in a place that had witnessed so much falling apart that one more woman's grief barely registered as unusual. When she could breathe again, when the sobs had subsided to hiccups and shaky inhales, she wiped her face with her sleeve. "I'm sorry," she managed. "Don't be," Malcolm said simply. "The chapel has absorbed worse. And better. It doesn't judge. It just holds." He stood slowly, joints creaking. "Come. There's one more thing you need to see." Chapter 4. The Guardian Speaks. The dead show us the past, but the living explain it. Malcolm led Alessandra through the chapel, past pillars and pews, past carvings that seemed to watch their progress. He moved with the confidence of someone who could navigate this space blind, who had walked these stones so many times they'd worn paths in his memory. He stopped at a small alcove she hadn't noticed before. Set into the wall was a carving, modern, relatively speaking. Maybe Victorian era. A plaque with names. Sinclair, Alessandra read. Robert, Oliver, William, this is your family. 600 years of us, Malcolm confirmed. All the way back to William who built this place. We've been guardians since the beginning. He touched the plaque gently, fingers tracing names like reading Braille. Each one made sacrifices. Oliver died at Flodden, far from home, far from the stones he'd sworn to protect. Robert let the Reformation mob strip the chapel rather than fight and see it burned. My great-grandfather nearly went bankrupt keeping the roof patched during the Depression. "And you?" Alessandra asked quietly. Malcolm was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was different. Softer. More vulnerable. "My wife," he said. "Sarah. She died 5 years ago. Cancer. We knew it was coming. Had months to prepare, though you can never really prepare. The night she died, I came here. Couldn't bear to be in the house without her. Couldn't bear the silence where her breathing used to be. So I walked here, it was past midnight, like now, and I sat in that pew where you were sitting. And I saw her." Alessandra looked at him sharply. "A memory? Like the others?" "I don't know," Malcolm said honestly. "She was sitting next to me. I could see her as clearly as I see you now. She took my hand, I felt her hand, Alessandra, warm and solid, and she said, 'I'm not gone. I'm just differently here.'" I thought I was losing my mind. Grief hallucination. The brain protecting itself from unbearable loss. But then it kept happening. Not every night. Not even every month. But sometimes, when I'm here alone, when the light is right, when I'm open. I see her, still here, still present, still loving this place. Is that why you stay? Alessandra asked. Why you keep being the guardian? Malcolm considered this. Partly, but also because. He gestured around the chapel. Someone has to remember that places can be sacred without being churches. That mystery matters. That not everything needs to be explained or excavated or turned into a museum exhibit. Beneath us, right now, beneath our feet, there are crypts that haven't been opened in centuries. We've had archaeologists beg for permission to dig. Treasure hunters, government officials, even universities offering enormous grants. And every time, the Sinclairs say no. Not because we know what's down there. Maybe there's treasure. Maybe there's nothing but bones and disappointment. But the possibility, the mystery itself, that's worth protecting. Because once you dig it up, once you catalogue it and photograph it and publish papers about it, it's no longer mysterious. It's just data. Alessandra understood. She thought of her dissertation, sitting on a hard drive, 40,000 words analyzing sacred geometry in medieval architecture. Peer-reviewed, footnoted, academically rigorous, and utterly lifeless compared to 5 minutes of standing in this chapel at midnight. I've been running away, she said suddenly. The words came out before she could stop them. From my divorce, from my failure, from the fact that I can't have children and my husband decided that made me insufficient. Malcolm didn't respond immediately. He just listened, the way the stones listened. I came to Scotland because I had to go somewhere, Alessandra continued. Anywhere. I told everyone it was for research, but really I needed to not be in my life for a while. And then I saw that road sign. Rosslyn. 7 miles. And something, I don't know what, pulled me here. Like I didn't have a choice. Like the chapel was calling and I had to answer. She looked at Malcolm. Why? Why me? Why tonight? Malcolm smiled. That same gentle, knowing smile. The chapel doesn't explain itself. But in my experience, it shows people what they need to see when they're ready to see it. Not a moment before. You climbed that wall tonight for a reason. You entered this space for a reason. And now you've seen, really seen, that beauty survives. That love persists. That even things that are broken or destroyed or killed too young, they echo forward. They matter. They shape the future in ways we can't predict. He gestured to the apprentice pillar. That boy died at 16. Murdered by envy. Terrible. Tragic. Unfair. But his work has inspired millions of people across 6 centuries. His dragons will outlast nations. His leaves will still be growing, metaphorically, when everyone who hurt you is dust. You can't have children, Malcolm said gently. Biologically. But that doesn't mean you can't create. The apprentice never had children either. But he left this. And it's alive in a way that flesh and blood can never be. Immune to time. Immune to death. Alessandra felt something crack open in her chest. Not painfully. More like ice breaking in spring. Like frozen earth accepting rain. Like a seed splitting to let the plant emerge. "What do I do now?" she whispered. "Whatever you want," Malcolm said. "Go back to teaching. Write a different dissertation. Travel more. Or go home and rebuild the life you had into something new. The chapel doesn't prescribe. It just reminds. Reminds you that you're part of a story much larger than yourself. That pain is temporary but beauty is permanent. That the work of your hands and heart, whatever that work is, it matters." He reached into his robe pocket and pulled out a small stone. Rough. Ordinary. The color of twilight. "From the courtyard," he explained. "When you're far away, when you're back in America or Boston or wherever life takes you, and you wonder if any of this was real, hold this. Close your eyes. And listen." Alessandra took the stone. It was warm from Malcolm's pocket. Or from its own internal heat. Or from 600 years of absorbing prayer and grief and joy. It fit perfectly in her palm. "What will I hear?" she asked. Malcolm's eyes crinkled with warmth. "Whatever you need to." They stood in comfortable silence for a moment. 2 strangers who had become something else. Witnesses, perhaps. Co-conspirators in mystery. "Come," Malcolm said finally. "There's one more thing. The reason I really came tonight. I knew someone would be here. I always know on equinox nights, and I wanted to show you something the chapel only reveals to very few." He led her toward a section of wall she'd passed earlier without noticing. Just another carved surface, covered in the same intricate Celtic knots and botanical details as everywhere else. But Malcolm ran his hand along the stone in a specific pattern. A small panel shifted. Behind it, hidden for who knows how long, was a carved face. A woman's face. Modern. Or relatively modern. The carving style was different from the medieval work. Cleaner lines, less weathering. And the face looked like Alessandra. How? Alessandra couldn't form the question. "I don't know," Malcolm said honestly. "No one does. But every few decades, a new carving appears. Always hidden. Always of someone who came here seeking something. The chapel adds them. Somehow. No one sees it happen. But they appear. This one appeared about a year ago. I found it last spring. And tonight, when I felt someone climb that wall, when I came to check, I knew it was you. Alessandra reached out, touched her own stone face. It was cool, solid, real. You're part of the story now, Malcolm said softly. Part of the memory. Part of what this place is. Centuries from now, someone else might find this carving and wonder who you were. What you were searching for. Whether you found it. Did I? Alessandra asked. Find it? Malcolm smiled. I don't know. Did you? Chapter 5. The Music of Stones. Every mystery has a key. Sometimes, it's a song. Malcolm closed the panel gently, hiding Alessandra's carved face again. The stone settled back into place with a soft sound like contentment. Or completion. Now, he said, I want to show you the real secret. The one that was hidden for 500 years and discovered by accident. He led her to the center of the nave, directly beneath the famous ceiling. The ceiling William St. Clair had obsessed over. The 213 carved cubes, each with a different geometric pattern. Malcolm pulled a small remote from his pocket. I don't usually do this. The tourists during the day get a lecture about the ceiling, but we don't demonstrate. Too many people asking to record, to analyze, to turn it into something for YouTube. But tonight is different. He pressed a button. Soft lights illuminated the ceiling, making the carvings stand out in sharp relief. Each cube was visible now, each pattern distinct. In 2005, Malcolm began. A man named Tommy Mitchell visited the chapel with his son Stuart. Tommy was a musician. Stuart was a composer. They stood right where we're standing and looked up at this ceiling. And Tommy said something that changed everything. He said, "These patterns, they look like Chladni figures." Alessandra's historian brain kicked in. Chladni figures. The pattern sound creates when you vibrate sand on a metal plate. Ernst Chladni, 18th century physicist. Exactly, Malcolm confirmed. Different frequencies create different geometric patterns. A pure tone at 440 Hz creates one pattern. 528 Hz creates another. The patterns are unique signatures of sound. Tommy and Stuart spent years analyzing the ceiling. They matched each carved pattern to a specific frequency. Then they arranged those frequencies according to the order of the cubes. And they created a composition. Malcolm pressed another button. This is the Rosslyn Motet. The song hidden in stone for 5 centuries. The music filled the chapel. It was unlike anything Alessandra had heard. Not quite medieval, not quite modern, haunting, mathematical but somehow deeply emotional, like someone had found a way to make geometry sing. And as the music played, the chapel responded. The stones themselves seemed to vibrate, not visibly, but Alessandra felt it in her chest, in her bones, in the cells of her body. A resonance. As if the building had been waiting 500 years to hear its own name called in its own language. Malcolm spoke quietly, his voice blending with the music. William St. Clair built this place as a prayer, but not a prayer in words. A prayer in frequency, in vibration, in the language that existed before language, the sound of creation itself. The visions returned, all of them, all at once. The apprentice carving, his chisel moving in rhythm with the music. The mother watching, her grief transmuted into something like peace. The master kneeling, forgiven at last by the beauty he'd tried to destroy. William St. Clair himself, appearing for the first time tonight, standing near the altar. Elderly now, near death, but his face radiant with satisfaction. He'd built something that would sing after he was silent. Mission accomplished. The Knights Templar processing again, but this time they weren't solemn. They were celebrating. Whatever they'd brought here, treasure or truth or sacred feminine principle or just the idea that mystery itself is holy, it was safe, preserved, encoded in stone and sound. Mary, Queen of Scots, her hand on her pregnant belly, mouthing words of prayer that harmonized with the music. Monks from different centuries, all singing together, their vespers blending across time into one eternal hymn. And then Alessandra saw herself. Not the carved face. Her actual self, as she'd been an hour ago. Climbing the wall. Entering the chapel. Touching the apprentice pillar with tentative fingers. Crying in a pew. Speaking with Malcolm. She was watching her own memory, freshly carved into the stone's consciousness, already becoming part of the story. The music swelled, and in that swell, Alessandra understood something she'd been circling around all night. The chapel wasn't showing her the past. It was showing her pattern. The eternal pattern of seeking and finding, of breaking and healing, of dying and being reborn as something beautiful. The apprentice died, but his dragons fly forever. The marriage died, but she, Alessandra, she was still here, still capable of creating, still capable of touching stone and being touched by it, still capable of being part of a story much larger than her small grief. The music reached its crescendo. Every cube in the ceiling seemed to glow, not with light, but with attention. The entire building focused itself into this moment, this frequency, this perfect harmonic relationship between human intention and divine mathematics. And then, silence. The music stopped. The visions faded. The glowing settled back into ordinary stone. But Alessandra felt different. Lighter. As if something heavy she'd been carrying had dissolved, leaving only its lesson behind. "That's what William built," Malcolm said softly. "A space that remembers how to tune human hearts back into harmony. That shows us we're all part of one long song. That our individual notes, no matter how brief, no matter how tragic, they contribute to a music that's too large to ever end." Alessandra wiped her eyes. She'd cried more tonight than in the previous 8 months combined. But these tears felt different. Clean. Like rain washing dust from windows, letting light back in. "The carvings on this ceiling," Malcolm continued, "they represent specific frequencies. Healing frequencies, some say. 396 Hz for releasing fear and guilt. 528 Hz for transformation and DNA repair. 852 Hz for spiritual awakening." William encoded a healing machine into the architecture. Not for the body, necessarily. For the soul. For the part of us that forgets we're connected to everything, that forgets we're already whole even when we feel broken. He turned off the lights. The ceiling disappeared back into shadow. But Alessandra could still see it in her mind. Could still feel its pattern humming in her chest. "There's one more frequency," Malcolm said, "that William used throughout the chapel. 432 Hz. The so-called natural tuning. The frequency that mathematics says is in harmony with the universe itself, with water, with green chlorophyll, with the sun." The apprentice pillar was carved to resonate at 432 Hz when struck in exactly the right place. "Want to hear it?" Alessandra nodded. Malcolm walked to the pillar, pulled a small wooden mallet from his robe pocket. He'd come prepared, Alessandra realized. He'd known this night would unfold exactly like this. He struck the pillar gently. Once. On a dragon's carved scale, about 4 feet up the shaft. The note hung in the air like a physical thing. Pure. Clear. Impossibly sustained. Alessandra felt it in her solar plexus. In her heart. In the hollow place where David's absence had been living. And in that note, that single sustained frequency, she heard, or felt, or understood. "You are not broken. You are not insufficient. You are exactly what you're supposed to be. And your song, whatever it is, however it sounds, it belongs in the symphony." The silence that followed was complete. Holy. The silence that exists between heartbeats, between thoughts, between one life and the next. "Thank you," Alessandra whispered. To Malcolm. To the chapel. To the apprentice who died 500 years ago but had somehow reached across time to remind her that beauty survives everything. Thank you. Chapter 6. Dawn's Promise. Every night must end. But endings are just pauses. The first light came through the eastern window like an answer to a question Alessandra hadn't known she was asking. Soft. Gold. Certain. She'd been sitting in silence with Malcolm for perhaps an hour, perhaps minutes. Time had become unreliable, elastic, refusing to conform to clock measurements. The dawn light crept across the stone floor, illuminating dust motes that danced like tiny galaxies. It touched the base of the apprentice pillar, then climbed slowly, revealing details invisible in moonlight. The texture of scales, the delicate veining in leaves, the places where 500 years of hands had touched and smoothed and loved. The chapel looks different at dawn, Malcolm said quietly. Everything does. Night is for revelation. Day is for integration. Alessandra thought about that. About what she'd seen, felt, understood. About the visions of the apprentice and his mother and the knights carrying their sacred cargo. About her own face carved secretly into stone. About music hidden in a ceiling for 5 centuries. How did you integrate something like this? How did you take this experience and carry it back into regular life? Grocery stores and email and traffic and all the mundane machinery of existence. I don't know what to do with this, she admitted. I don't know how to be normal after tonight. Malcolm smiled. You don't have to be normal. Normal is overrated. You just have to be honest. With yourself. With others. About what you saw. What you learned. Which was what, exactly? Alessandra asked. What did I learn? Malcolm didn't answer immediately. He looked around the chapel, at the pillars he'd spent 40 years guarding, at the carvings he'd memorized, at the space he knew more intimately than his own home. Only you can answer that, he said finally. The chapel shows everyone something different. What they need. Not what they want. Need. Alessandra closed her eyes. The stone from the courtyard was still in her hand. She'd been holding it all night, unconsciously, the way you hold a talisman or a reminder. What had she learned? That beauty survives. That creation outlasts destruction. That even things that are broken become part of the pattern. That she didn't have to be a mother to create life, didn't have to be whole to be valuable, didn't have to understand everything to know something true. That mystery itself is a gift. That some questions are better than any answer. That being cracked open by grief isn't failure. It's preparation for being filled with something new. I learned, she said slowly, that I've been grieving the wrong loss. I've been mourning the children I can't have. The marriage that ended. The life I planned that never happened. But those losses, they're like the chapel's unfinished construction. William planned a huge cathedral. He only built a fraction. But that fraction, that failure, it's one of the most beautiful buildings in the world. Because it's incomplete. Because it's honest about its limitations. Malcolm nodded. William died with his dream unfinished. But the dream didn't die. It just changed form. Became something different. Something he never planned but couldn't have improved. The light reached the ceiling now. The carved cubes caught the sun and glowed. The Rosslyn motet, silent but present, embedded forever in geometry and stone. "I should go," Alessandra said. But she didn't move. "Yes," Malcolm agreed. "Before the tour buses arrive and ruin the magic." But he didn't move either. They sat together for another few minutes, watching the chapel wake up. Watching shadows retreat. Watching the mystery of night become the clarity of day, though really, both contained equal amounts of truth. Finally, Alessandra stood. Her body ached from sitting on hard wood for hours. Her eyes felt gritty from crying and not sleeping. But her heart felt lighter than it had in years. She walked to the apprentice pillar one last time, placed both hands on the warm stone, closed her eyes. "Thank you," she whispered. To the boy who'd carved it. To the building that had welcomed her. To Malcolm for being there. To whatever force had pulled her off the highway and brought her here. Thank you. When she opened her eyes, Malcolm was standing by the door, ready to walk her out, ready to lock the chapel and begin his daily routine as if nothing extraordinary had happened. Because for him, perhaps, it hadn't been extraordinary. Perhaps this was just what the chapel did, night after night, for centuries. Healing broken seekers. Showing them they belonged to a story larger than their pain. They walked to the door together. Malcolm opened it, the heavy wood creaking in protest or greeting, and morning air rushed in. Cool, clean, smelling of heather and dew and Scotland's ancient earth. Alessandra stepped outside, turned back to look at Malcolm one more time. He was framed by the Gothic arch, backlit by the chapel's interior glow. He looked timeless, eternal, like a figure from a medieval painting, or a vision, or a guardian who'd been standing in this exact spot for 600 years, welcoming seekers and sending them back into the world changed. "Will I see you again?" she asked. Malcolm's smile was gentle. "I'm here every day, dawn to dusk, but..." He paused. His eyes held something she couldn't quite read. Knowledge, maybe. Or certainty, or the peaceful acceptance of someone who'd long ago stopped being surprised by the chapel's mysteries. "But I suspect," he continued softly, "that the next time you visit, I'll be differently here. The way Sarah is. The way William is. The way the apprentice is. Present but not physical. Remembered but not gone." Alessandra's throat tightened. Are you saying? I'm 72, Malcolm said simply. I'm tired. I've done my duty. And I think tonight was my last real work as guardian. Showing you, explaining to you, passing the knowledge forward. My nephew will take over when I'm gone. Young man. Good heart. He'll do fine. And I'll still be here, in the way that matters. In the stones. In the memory. In the frequency. Alessandra didn't know what to say. Thank you seemed inadequate. Goodbye seemed wrong. So she just nodded. And Malcolm nodded back. An understanding passed between them that needed no words. She turned and walked across the courtyard. Climbed back over the wall, easier this time, muscle memory from the night before making her movements sure. When she reached the top and looked back, Malcolm was still standing in the doorway. He raised one hand in a small wave. And then she blinked. When her eyes reopened, the doorway was empty. The chapel door was closed. And the morning light fell on stone that looked exactly as it had looked for 600 years. Permanent. Patient. Holding its secrets close. Alessandra smiled. A real smile. The first genuine smile in longer than she could remember. She slipped the stone into her coat pocket and started walking back toward the village. Toward the inn. Toward breakfast and coffee and the practical business of continuing to be alive. Behind her, Rosslyn Chapel stood exactly as it had stood since 1446. Waiting. Remembering. Singing its silent song to anyone who is patient enough to hear. And now, as Alessandra walks back toward the village, as the sun rises over Scotland, as the chapel settles back into its daily rhythm, now it's time for you to rest. You've traveled far tonight. Through 600 years. Through stone and shadow. Through stories of creation and loss and the beauty that survives everything. Let those stories settle now. Like silt drifting to the bottom of a clear pool. Like snow covering ground. Like sleep covering consciousness. Feel your body sinking deeper. Heavier. The pillow beneath your head is soft. The blanket is warm. Your breath is slow and easy. You are safe. You are held. You are exactly where you're supposed to be. Imagine you're still in the chapel. It's dawn. The light is golden. The stones are warm beneath your hands. You're sitting on a wooden pew. The wood is smooth, worn by centuries of people who came here seeking exactly what you're seeking now. Peace. Rest. A place to set down your burdens for a little while. The apprentice pillar is beside you. You can feel its presence, solid, eternal, patient. The dragons carved into its surface seem to be breathing, slowly, in rhythm with your breath. Breathe in and out. In and out. The chapel is holding you, not physically, but in the way a song holds a note, in the way silence holds sound, in the way memory holds love. All the people who ever stood here, William and the apprentice and Malcolm and Alessandra and the knights and the mothers and the seekers, they're all around you now. Not scary, not demanding, just present, keeping watch while you rest. You are part of their story now, and they are part of yours. Connected across time by the simple act of seeking something true. Let your eyes close, if they aren't already closed. Let your thoughts slow down. Let the day's concerns drift away like leaves on a stream. Tomorrow will come. It always does. But tonight, right now, there is only this moment. This breath. This safe, warm, quiet space. The stones are watching over you. Malcolm is watching over you. The chapel itself is watching over you. You are not alone. You have never been alone. Sleep now, traveler. Sleep deeply. Sleep peacefully. The dragons will guard your dreams. The stones will hold your rest. And when you wake tomorrow, you'll carry a piece of Rosslyn with you. Forever. Good night.